Well, after all the dumping we've done on Question Period over the years, it's hard to say bad things about today's edition. It was, in short, a bit of a jaw-dropper. Bruce is in Ottawa tonight, Chantal's in Montreal, Andrew is here in Toronto. We'll get to Question Period in a second. I want to start off with what happened this evening, just in the last couple of hours. The Senate committee referring to the RCMP, the matters of the Duffy expenses and the Duffy Wright deal. This is the same group of people who not that long ago whitewashed their report and basically said nothing overly bad happened. What should we make of this, calling in the RCMP? Andrew.
Well, I guess the first question is, does the RCMP really need an invitation to investigate? But be that as it may, it certainly seems to be appropriate on the face of it. I just hope people won't let it drop there. I hope people won't assume that the only issue involved here was there personal criminal wrongdoing by one or two people, or are there larger systemic questions. I hope people won't allow the government to get by with the old excuse of, well, we can't offer any comment or answers because it's being investigated by the RCMP. In other words, I hope that this is not used as a way of cauterizing this issue rather than opening up for further investigation.
You may hope that, but really, do you believe it won't be?
Well, obviously it depends upon what a lot of the rest of us in the media and the opposition do. If all of us roll over and say, yeah, it's with the RCMP, so nobody has to answer any questions, then they'll be better able to get away with that. But it should be in everyone's interest, including, I may say, the government's, to come clean and be open as they possibly can about this, and we're not seeing a lot of that kind of transparency to date.
Chantal?
Well, I was watching that committee thinking that these people would never have met to review and revise their stance on Senator Duffy if this had not broken out in the open, so they were quite willing to give him a pass. It's fine to refer him to the RCMP. Maybe some senators need to find out that they don't have to give the mandate to the RCMP. The RCMP will decide how far it pushes its investigation. But I guess a lot of people out there are curious to know if this is a one-off, the Duffy case, or whether the honor system of the Senate was abused. And it would be interesting to see senators be curious about the general picture of how the Senate has been behaving.
Bruce, what did you make of it?
Well, it was extraordinary, and it would have been the most extraordinary thing that happened today had it not been for what happened in Question Period, Peter. I think it's the latest in a series of really disorderly retreats by the government on this file. And it really reveals to us that the government still doesn't have control over this. We're still in a situation really where the three people who probably know exactly what happened in the conversations that matter still aren't talking about those conversations. And I think the concern on the part of the opposition parties and the media has to be at this point not to allow this idea of an RCMP investigation to throw a blanket over all of the other probes and all of the other questions that deserve to be asked and deserve to be answered in the coming days. All
right, you mentioned Question Period, so let's remind people who only perhaps saw a glimpse of it at the top of this hour, give them a better sense of the flavor of things. The main event, the main bout, if you will, was clearly between the Leader of the Opposition, Tom Mulcair of the NDP, and the Prime Minister. Here's kind of a minute of clips from those exchanges. Watch this.
Did the Prime Minister ever discuss this matter in Cabinet? Who told Mike Duffy to remain silent? Once Mike Duffy received the $90,000 from the Prime Minister's office, he stopped cooperating with Deloitte, who were the auditors in the file. Was that part of the deal with Mike Duffy?
Mr. Duffy has received no money from the Prime Minister's office or from the taxpayers of Canada.
When the Chief of Staff of the Prime Minister, in the course of his functions, from the Prime Minister's office, gives $90,000 to shut up a sitting senator, that's out of the Prime Minister's office. Do they have a copy of the check? Has the Prime Minister or anyone in his office seen that check?
There is no check from the Prime Minister's office. There is no use of Prime Minister's office funds in this affair.
If he's never seen the check, how can the Prime Minister rise in this House and tell us that it's a personal check? How does he know that it's not from a trust account? How does he know that if he's never seen the check?
There is no such money that has gone out of our office or out of PMO budget.
Well, if you didn't know before watching that, you know now that Tom Mulcair was a lawyer. because he kind of used his legal background to go after things. That and the suggestion from one Andrew Coyne right here on this program not long ago to shorten questions, get to the point, make the question short. You are getting some credit for this, Andrew.
Well, it's ridiculous. It's got nothing to do with me. I can assure you.
No, but I mean, you know, you made this point and a number of people picked up on it. Yeah. But nevertheless, watching what happened there today, is that the kind of question period that is something that those parliamentarians should be striving for on a daily basis? Can they keep that kind of exchange going?
That certainly should be. I mean, on the one hand, it was extraordinary. We have not seen this kind of session and question period for many years. It was, on the other hand, exactly what they should be doing most of the time. And I hope some MPs are learning that you get better results if you don't showboat and you don't preface your question with 3-minute preambles and you actually just ask short, simple, factual questions. It has to be sustained for everybody's sake. Again, people always want to say, well, was there a knockout blow and who hit who? You're engaged here, as you should be, in fact-finding and trying to find out the truth of the matter. The truth may be entirely benign. It may be, in fact, that the Prime Minister's story is entirely truthful and there's no story here. Or it may not be. And so you don't have to come up with the big Perry Mason moment of, aha. What you're doing is chipping away, laying down markers, putting the government on the record about certain facts, and if the story holds up, then the story will hold up, and if it doesn't, it won't. All
right. Well, so what did we take away from this? I think everybody agrees it was quite something to watch. So it had that kind of attraction to it. But in terms of substance, did we learn anything today that we weren't aware of before question period? Chantal?
No, we did not, except that we now know who the leader of the opposition is in the House of Commons. And Thomas Mulcair has established himself clearly as the dominant opposition figure in that House. So I think from that angle it was interesting. But on a fact-based basis, I don't think that question period really allows you to do what Andrew describes, which is something that would happen in a court of law, a Perry Mason style interrogation. And I also think that when we are saying what we are saying about it, we are acting as journalists who think that we watched someone give someone a good run at a press conference. But in the reality of daily question period, I agree that tighter questions serve Mulcair today and usually particularly well. But it's also the role of the opposition to highlight in those questions the differences between where it stands and where the government is going. It can't just be prosecutorial. That being said, I can't think of very many leaders of the oppositions that I've covered that could have delivered the performance I watched today.
Bruce?
I think we learned two things. I think the first thing that we learned was that this issue has not been like any other that we've seen before, in the sense that probably all of the Conservative cabinet and backbenchers were hoping, indeed maybe expecting, that the Prime Minister was going to be able to come into the House today to face the fire and really spray foam and put the fire out, because he's been able to do that so many times in the course of his career as Prime Minister. And against that, we have become accustomed to seeing opposition attacks fizzle and fade under that kind of discipline that the Prime Minister has typically had. We didn't see that today. We saw the reverse of it. It's another sign of the loss of invincibility of the government. The second thing that we learned is really in the area of answers that the Prime Minister was not comfortable giving. So I looked at what Mr. Mulcair did as something of a reconnaissance by fire. He was throwing questions at areas basically so that he could observe when and in what circumstances the Prime Minister was willing to give a very specific and detailed answer. But then there were a number of areas where clearly that wasn't forthcoming, and that suggests that there are more difficult answers that the government probably doesn't want to get into, and opportunity for more questioning ahead.
You're nodding there, Andrew.
Well, I think that's a very important point, is what oftentimes what you learn from these things is from what's not said, the dog that didn't bark. He did not have an answer, for example, of, did the cabinet discuss this? Or the general question of, were there broader discussions about how to deal with this Duffy situation? Because, of course, what we're trying to get at here is not just what did the Prime Minister know and when did he know it. That's sort of, again, the Perry Mason question. What we're trying to get at here is, was there a culture, was there a set of expectations, was there an ethical climate established by the person at the top that said that shortcuts could be taken and expediencies could be pursued that would not meet the smell test? And that certainly is very much worth getting at. Again, quite apart from RCMP investigations or any of that business.
Question about the lawyer was one of those that I saw too.
but I don't think question period is actually needed to show that. Up to a point, the fact that all these things have been happening is a sign that their culture is set in there. And at the end of the day, regardless of whether you find, a proof or an answer that goes to that, the Prime Minister is responsible for the tone that is set. He is responsible for having a Chief of Staff that thought that it was okay to sign off a check to get rid of an issue rather than probe and try to clean up the Senate.
There was something, Bruce, you said a couple of minutes ago that reminded me of something that struck me while I was watching Question Period today. And it was whenever the Prime Minister was talking, watching the faces of the people around him on his side. In other words, the Conservative, not only the backbench, but the front bench as well. They were focused very much on every word he said and the way he said it. It was almost as if it was for them too the first time they were hearing the answers to this question. And when you run that against the backdrop of some of the things we've talked about in the last few weeks about, the potential of a, kind of open mutiny going on inside the Conservative caucus, I found that interesting. What, aside from the headlines, what struck you most about watching this question period? Andrew?
To pick up on something you were just saying, the Prime Minister was obviously taking this very seriously, and to his credit, I think he actually, as a pure performance, did quite well. But they realized that this is serious business. There was not some of the same bravura and ho ho ho, laugh it off type of thing. I think that and the serious, methodical nature of the opposition were the two most striking things today.
Chantal?
I think that the looks that you noticed on the MPs' faces and the kind of panicky talk that we heard around that Senate table tonight, I don't think that it's the opposition or the media driving it. I think it's Canadians and the public. I think that these MPs, these senators are taking a beating in the social media, at home, in their writings, and that's why they have the glum face. If they'd gone home and no one had mentioned it, or it didn't really matter, they wouldn't have looked as serious. It wasn't just Thomas Mulcair asking tough questions of the Prime Minister.
Bruce?
Well, I think the government has had such a tin ear on this issue for so many days in a row, and the more that they tried to play the issue the way they have played so many other issues in the past with real pugilism and counterattacks, the more they found that their own base as well as general constituents were really getting angry with them. And you didn't actually see a message from the Conservatives that started to get out in front of public opinion at all until probably about Saturday in an interview that Michelle Rempel, a Conservative MP from Calgary, gave to Evan Solomon on the House. That was the first time that I saw the Conservative message look as though it was a little bit more in tune with public opinion, and I think on many questions the Prime Minister was a little bit more like that today than he has been in the past.
But they're having a particularly bad run. I mean, it's not just this issue. I mean, there was the patronage appointments issue, there's the Arthur Porter thing that is bubbling for the last 24 hours, and of course the robocalls ruling last week. They've got a lot on their plate, Andrew, here to turn a corner of any kind. Absolutely,
and I think what the dilemma they're running into is that this is existential. You can't spin your way out of something if spinning is how you got into this. Oftentimes you can read how a government gets into this kind of trouble by the way in which they try to get out of it. And if expediency and taking shortcuts and looking the other way and all those kinds of ethical shortcomings are how they got into this, then you need a better answer than just more of that kind of tactic and that kind of thing. You need to really take a look at yourself and what you're doing, and I'm not sure whether the leopard can change its spots to that extent, but I keep coming back to this. There's no alternative but transparency if they really want to dig themselves out of this. I don't think they fully understand that.
I got 15 seconds, Chantal, for you to close it out.
Well, you've got me at a loss for words with your 15 seconds. But,
sorry.
So I'm going to take a pass.
Okay, well, you almost took it up anyway in taking
Yes.
the pass. All right, listen, thank you all. It was, it was a good night to be doing this. We're usually Thursday, but this was a good Tuesday to do it. Chantal's in Montreal, Andrew is in Toronto, and Bruce is in Ottawa. Thank you very much. Quick reminder, no ad issue this Thursday, at least at this point. That's the plan.